The sign says population 50. The actual residents say it's closer to 35. And the paved road to get there? It ends almost 6 miles short. You walk the rest. Welcome to the Eastern Sierra, where California keeps a collection of towns so isolated that winter doesn't just slow them down, it erases them from the map entirely. Every mountain pass slams shut for 6 months. The only highway connecting these places to civilization regularly gets buried by avalanches. And the people who stay? They tunnel out of their front doors and call it Tuesday. In this video, you're going to meet a town that Los Angeles literally killed by drinking its lake dry. A ghost town where miners put sandbags in their beds to stop stray bullets while they slept. A ski town where propane lines exploded under 20 feet of snow and launched a vacation home into the sky. And a place so cold that the guy who discovered it froze to death before anybody even moved there. If this sounds like your kind of chaos, do me a favor and smash that like button. Think of it as a survival flare. Let's start the countdown. Number 12. Olancha. You've never heard of Olancha. Almost nobody has. And that's wild considering something extremely recognizable comes out of this town every single day. Olancha sits at about 3,600 feet along Highway 395 in Inyo County, a former stagecoach and supply stop from the 1800s. That time basically forgot. The population hovers around 192 people, give or take. There's no downtown, there's no grocery store. There is, however, a 100,000 square foot crystal geyser bottled water plant pumping pure Sierra spring water into millions of bottles that get shipped all over the country. So picture this, a dusty little settlement where you can see every building from a single vantage point. The dry ghost of Owens Lake stretching out to the east, sagebrush rolling past trailers and sun-bleached fences. And right in the middle of it all, a gleaming industrial water plant the size of a small Costco. The contrast is genuinely absurd, and the plant hasn't exactly been a smooth neighbor. There have been ongoing controversies about groundwater usage and wastewater contamination, which is a sentence that hits different when the entire town could fit inside a mid-sized restaurant. Olancha is technically connected to the outside world year-round since it sits along the lower section of 395, where snow isn't the biggest problem. The isolation here isn't seasonal, it's permanent. There's simply nothing around for miles in any direction, and the nearest real town with a supermarket is Bishop, over an hour north. In winter, that drive gets longer, darker, and more treacherous than most people would ever sign up for. This is where the Eastern Sierra begins, and it only gets wilder from here. Number 11, Randsburg. Every ghost town in America claims to still be alive. Randsburg actually kind of is. Sitting at 3,500 feet along Highway 395 between Ridgecrest and Boron in Kern County, Randsburg is what happens when a gold rush town of 3,500 people shrinks to somewhere between 45 and 99 residents and just refuses to die. Gold was discovered here in 1895, and within a few years the Yellow Aster mine was cranking out $120,000 in gold a month. Adjusted for inflation, that's over $4.5 million today. Every month from one mine. The town had over 20 bars, rampant prostitution, and frequent shootings. Water was so scarce that residents paid 4 cents a gallon just for drinking water and 50 cents for a bath. The founders named the place Rand Camp after South Africa's famous Rand mining district, and they named the 2 neighboring towns Johannesburg and Red Mountain, just to keep the theme going. Today, Randsburg calls itself a living ghost town, which is the kind of branding only a California desert community could pull off with a straight face. The old general store still has a functioning 1904 soda fountain where you can get a milkshake. They host Old West Days every September, and the whole town is privately owned by its remaining residents, who have actively resisted state park status because they don't want the government telling them what to do with their own ghost town. That's an energy you have to respect. Number 10. Cartago. Cartago has 62 people and a water company that serves 43 customers. That's the kind of ratio that makes you wonder who the other 19 people are drinking from. This tiny cluster of homes sits on the western shore of Owens Lake in Inyo County. And if you look east across the valley floor, you'll see a massive flat expanse of cracked, dusty alkaline lake bed stretching for miles. That used to be a real lake, a big one, with actual water in it. Back in the 1870s, Cartago was a legitimate steamboat port. Wood and silver ore came down from the mountains above, got loaded onto boats, and shipped across Owens Lake to the railhead on the other side. The town had a purpose, a function, a future. Then Los Angeles decided it was thirsty. The city diverted the Owens River through the LA Aqueduct starting in 1913, and over the next few decades, the lake just disappeared. The boats were gone. The port was gone. The economic reason for Cartago's existence was gone. What remains is a handful of structures, a very small water utility, and the kind of quiet that makes you check your phone to see if you still have signal. You don't. If you stand in Cartago today and look east toward where the lake used to be, you're staring at one of the most surreal landscapes in America. Miles of white, cracked alkaline mud baking under the desert sun. It looks like a dried ocean floor on Mars. And somewhere underneath all of that dust, the bones of a lake that once carried steamships full of silver ore. 62 people live next to that absence. It takes a certain kind of person to stare at a dead lake every morning and still call the place home. We'll come back to this vanished lake later because another town on this list got it even worse. Way worse. Number 9, Coleville. Here's a detail that sounds made up but isn't. Coleville High School, located in California, plays its sports against Nevada schools. Not because they're rebellious, not because of some weird rivalry tradition, because they are so geographically cut off from the rest of California that the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association was the only league that made sense. Coleville sits in the Antelope Valley of Mono County, up near the Nevada border at around 5,100 feet, with a population of about 419 people. It's part of a cluster of 3 tiny communities strung along 395, including Walker and Topaz. Together they form a little pocket of civilization along the West Walker River that is, practically speaking, more connected to Nevada than to anything in their own state. The history here is beautiful and brutal. In 1878, a diphtheria epidemic swept through the valley and killed over half the children. Their graves are still there in the cemetery north of town. And along Highway 395 in Topaz, there's a row of massive cottonwood trees planted around 1900 by a man named Henry Dixon, so his disabled daughter could enjoy shade during her afternoon buggy rides. That's a detail that'll sit with you. In winter, Walker Canyon between these towns and Point South becomes an avalanche zone that regularly shuts down 395. When that happens, the only way out is north into Nevada, which might explain why the high school already has the bus route figured out. Number 8. Benton Hot Springs. The sign at the entrance to Benton Hot Springs reads, Historical Benton Hot Springs, population 13.5. And honestly, that might be generous. This tiny community sits out on U.S. Route 6, east of Bishop at about 5,300 feet, surrounded by high desert scrubland and the White Mountains in the distance. The 2020 census counted 279 people in the broader Benton area, but the actual hot spring settlement is much smaller. The "and a half" on the sign is a joke, but only barely. In the 1860s, this was a silver mining boomtown with up to 5,000 residents. There were mills, saloons, and all the usual infrastructure that appears when someone finds precious metal in the ground and disappears the second the metal runs out. By the early 1900s, nearly everyone was gone. What saved Benton from total extinction was the hot springs themselves. Natural geothermal water bubbles up from underground at perfect soaking temperatures. And by the 1940s and 50s, Hollywood celebrities like Fred MacMurray were making the long drive out to soak in private mineral baths under the stars. Today, the resort offers 13 private outdoor hot tub sites scattered across the property. You can book one for the evening and sit in naturally heated mineral water while staring at the Milky Way with zero light pollution. It's genuinely stunning. The catch is that Getting there requires driving an hour from Bishop on a road that doesn't inspire a ton of confidence once the weather turns. And once you're there, the nearest anything is an hour away. That's the deal with the Eastern Sierra. You trade convenience for experiences you literally cannot get anywhere else. Number 7. Lone Pine. Lone Pine has a single stoplight. 1. For the whole town. And 12 miles to the west, Mount Whitney rises to 14,505 feet, the highest point in the contiguous United States. That's the biggest gap between infrastructure and grandeur in the entire country. About 2,014 people live in Lone Pine at 3,727 feet elevation in Inyo County. And if you've ever watched a Western, a sci-fi movie, or basically anything filmed in a dramatic desert landscape, you've seen the Alabama Hills just west of town. 30,000 acres of surreal, rounded granite boulders that have served as the backdrop for hundreds of films since the 1920s. Gunga Din, How the West Was Won, Iron Man, Django Unchained, Gladiator, Star Trek. The list goes on and on. The dark side. On March 26, 1872, a massive earthquake destroyed most of Lone Pine and killed 27 of the roughly 250 to 300 people living there. That's about a 10% fatality rate from a single event. The quake literally rearranged the valley floor and created new fault scarps that are still visible today, over 150 years later. The Alabama Hills are genuinely one of the strangest filming locations in America. These rounded granite boulders, shaped by millions of years of weathering, sit in the foreground of the sharpest, most jagged peaks in the Sierra. That contrast made directors lose their minds. In the 1920s, Hollywood discovered that you could film a cowboy riding through the Alabama Hills, and it looked like the most dramatic, mythical version of the West imaginable. The area became so popular with film crews that Lone Pine started hosting an annual film festival celebrating its cinematic history. A town of 2,000 people hosting a festival for an industry based 200 miles south. Only in the Eastern Sierra. Real estate in Lone Pine is some of the most affordable in the Eastern Sierra. Homes run around $300,000 to $325,000, which sounds reasonable until you remember you're buying into a town with one traffic light, major wildfire risk, and the nearest hospital a solid drive away. In winter, storms can close Highway 395 to the north and drop the temperature into the teens. You won't get trapped the way the higher towns do, but you will feel the isolation pressing in from every direction. If you're enjoying this countdown through some of the most forgotten corners of California, take a second and subscribe. We cover places like this every week, and trust me, the top 5 on this list are where things get truly unhinged. Number 6. Mammoth Lakes. If any town on this list proves that isolation isn't just about population size, it's Mammoth Lakes. This is the largest community in Mono County at 7,191 people, and it's also the only incorporated town in the entire county. It sits at nearly 7,900 feet at the base of Mammoth Mountain, which averages 400 inches of snow a year and regularly stays open for skiing into July. During a normal winter, that's already intense. The 2022 to 2023 season was not a normal winter. Mammoth Mountain's main lodge recorded 715 inches of snow that season. That's nearly 60 feet. The summit got closer to 870 inches. The old record was 668 inches from 2011, and the new total destroyed it. During one 3-week stretch from late December to mid-January, the mountain got 240 inches, which is 20 feet of snow in 21 days. Downtown Mammoth Lakes looked like a snow canyon. Cars vanished, homes vanished. First-floor windows, second-floor windows, entire structures disappeared under white. Residents couldn't open their front doors. For about 3 weeks in January, people only went outside to shovel and to grab supplies. And then people started dying. The most horrifying hazard was something called a roof avalanche. When snow piles 6, 8, 10 feet deep on a roof and then warms slightly, the entire slab releases at once and slides off in a massive wave. On March 1st, 2023, an 80-year-old woman was killed when a roof avalanche crushed her on her own porch. She walked outside and the roof of her own home dropped a wall of snow on top of her. Then came the propane explosions. With gas lines buried under dozens of feet of snow, leaks became invisible. One explosion leveled a building and injured 5 people. Another one on April 1st obliterated an unoccupied multi-million-dollar vacation home and triggered a snowmelt flash flood that poured into a neighboring condo complex. The town declared a state of emergency on March 3rd. Buildings were red-tagged and condemned. Families were displaced. And all of this happened in a California ski town that most people associate with fun weekend trips. Oh, and real estate here? The median single-family home price is around $1.3 million. Condos run about $725,000 to $785,000. And the town has a full-blown workforce housing crisis, where Lyft operators and restaurant employees live in vans because they can't afford rent. Over 96% of the land in Inyo and Mono counties is owned by the federal or state government, which means almost nothing is available for new housing. So you've got workers sleeping in parking lots while vacation homes sit empty for 10 months a year. Mammoth is where the Eastern Sierra stops being quirky and starts being genuinely intense. Number 5. Keeler. This is the town that Los Angeles murdered. There's really no gentler way to put it. Keeler sits on the eastern shore of Owens Lake in Inyo County at about 3,600 feet, with a population that hovers around 70 people. If you drive through it today, you'll see a scattering of structures, some converted railroad boxcars that people live in, a lot of dust, and a huge dry lake bed stretching out to the west. In the late 1800s, this was a completely different place. Keeler was a booming silver port town with 2,500 to 3,000 residents. There was a 300-foot wooden pier extending into Owens Lake. Steamships hauled silver ore across the water from the mines at Cerro Gordo in the mountains above. The town had an Olympic-sized swimming pool. It was thriving. Then the city of Los Angeles built the LA Aqueduct in 1913 and diverted the Owens River, which fed the lake. Over the following decades, Owens Lake dried up entirely. No water, no boats, no port, no reason for Keeler to exist. The population cratered. By the 1980s, many of the remaining residents were elderly, disabled, or suffering from respiratory disease. Because the dry lake bed didn't just sit there quietly, it became the single largest source of particulate air pollution in the United States, according to the EPA. The alkaline dust from the exposed lake bed blew in massive storms across the valley, coating everything in Keeler with a fine, caustic powder. The Owens Valley became the dustiest place in North America and the second dustiest place on the entire planet, behind only the Aral Sea in Central Asia. So, a city 200 miles away drank your lake, destroyed your economy, and then the empty lake bed slowly poisoned you. And nobody in Los Angeles gave it a second thought. Keeler is still there. 70 people, give or take. Boxcar houses and all. Number 4. Lee Vining. Lee Vining was founded by a man named Leroy Vining, a miner who set up a camp on Mono Lake's western shore back in 1852. He spent about a decade prospecting and living in the region. Then, in 1863, he walked into a saloon in Aurora, Nevada, and accidentally shot himself in the groin with the pistol he was carrying in his pocket. He died from the injury. That's how this town got its founder, and honestly, it sets the tone for everything that follows. Lee Vining sits at about 6,780 feet with 217 year-round residents, right at the base of Tioga Pass. Tioga Pass is California's highest highway crossing at 9,943 feet and the eastern gateway into Yosemite National Park. In summer, it's the main route between the Eastern Sierra and the Central Valley. In winter, it closes completely. For the 2025 to 2026 season, Tioga Pass closed on November 12th and didn't reopen until May 15th. That's 6 months with no direct western route. When Tioga is closed, Lee Vining relies entirely on Highway 395 to the north and south. And in the winter of 2023, even that failed. A series of avalanches buried 395 north of Lee Vining, trapping two law enforcement officers near Mono Lake. The highway stayed closed from late February into April. Caltrans also closed roughly 90 miles of 395 from near Bishop to Bridgeport during a separate whiteout event. Lee Vining was functionally stranded. The town sits on the shore of Mono Lake, which is one of the most visually alien landscapes in California. Ancient. Tufa towers, tall spires of calcium carbonate formed underwater, rise from the lake surface and shoreline like something from another planet. The water is roughly 3 times saltier than the ocean and supports an ecosystem of brine shrimp and alkali flies that feeds millions of migratory birds. And then there's the Whoa Nelly Deli. This is a restaurant operating inside a gas station at the junction of Highway 395 and Tioga Pass Road. It serves lobster bisque, wild buffalo meatloaf, and fish tacos alongside the diesel pumps. It's consistently rated as one of the best restaurants in the entire Eastern Sierra. Inside a mobile station. In a town of 217 people. Lee Vining is a place that oscillates between extremes. In summer, millions of tourists pour through on their way to Yosemite, and the town buzzes with hikers, climbers, and photographers. In winter, the tourists vanish. The pass locks shut, and 217 people hunker down in the cold shadow of the mountains with Mono Lake's strange tufa formations standing like sentinels in the freezing fog. The nearest full-service grocery store is Bishop, over an hour south on a highway that might be closed. Lee Vining is that kind of place. Number 3. June Lake. June Lake is what happens when you take a place so beautiful that people call it the Switzerland of California and then bury it under snow. So deep that residents have to dig tunnels from their front doors to reach the street. About 629 people live here year-round at 7,654 feet on the June Lake Loop, a 16-mile horseshoe road that branches off Highway 395. The setting is staggering. Alpine lakes, granite peaks, dense pine forests, and some of the best trout fishing in the American West. In summer, the population triples to around 2,500 as vacation homeowners and tourists pour in. In winter, it empties. Over half the homes in June Lake are second residences owned by people who live somewhere warmer from November through April. The June mountain ski area gets about 250 inches of snow a year, which is enough to keep a small resort running, but not enough to attract the mammoth-level crowds. It's the locals' alternative. The quiet mountain. The place where you ski without waiting in lines. The problem is the snow load. In heavy winters, June Lake gets buried. Not metaphorically. People wake up and literally cannot open their exterior doors because the snow has packed to the height of the doorframe. So they go out through upper floor windows or dig tunnels from the entryway. This isn't a once-a-decade emergency. This is a recurring winter reality, the kind of thing people here just deal with while the rest of California complains about drizzle. During extended storms, the June Lake Loop can close entirely, reducing access to a single point from 395. If 395 closes too, which it does in the Walker Canyon avalanche zone, or during whiteout conditions, June Lake goes dark. No way in, no way out, and a few hundred people waiting for Caltrans to dig the highway back open. And yet, people love it here. The summer is genuinely paradise. Fall colors explode across the loop in October. And winter, if you're built for it, offers absolute solitude in a landscape that looks like a painting. You just need to be comfortable with the possibility that your front door becomes a wall for a few months. Number 2. Bodie. Nobody lives in Bodie anymore. But the story of this place is so dark, so wild, and so perfectly preserved that it deserves a spot on this list just for what happened when people did. Bodie sits at 8,379 feet in the Bodie Hills of Mono County at an elevation where the climate is classified as subarctic. In the middle of California, winter temperatures regularly plunge to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Blizzards produce 20-foot snowdrifts, and there are no trees for firewood because the miners cut them all down, so wood had to be imported. The town is named after W.S. Bodie, a prospector who discovered gold here in 1859. He never benefited from it. He froze to death in a blizzard that same winter, and his body was never recovered. Then they built a town named after him. They even misspelled his name in the process. Between 1876 and 1882, Bodie exploded to over 10,000 people. It had 65 saloons, gambling halls, opium dens, and houses of ill repute operating simultaneously. California State Parks describes killings in Bodie as occurring with monotonous regularity, sometimes becoming almost daily events. The fire bell, which told the ages of the deceased at burials, rang often and for a very long time. Locals reportedly greeted each morning by asking whether they had a man for breakfast, meaning whether someone had been killed overnight. A Methodist minister described Bodie in 1881 as a sea of sin, lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. The expression bad man from Bodie entered California slang as shorthand for a violent and dangerous person, though the character was actually a fictional composite from an 1878 satirical newspaper story. By the time the last mine closed in 1942, Bodie had produced over $30 million in gold and shrunk to nearly zero residents. Today, it's a California state park preserved in a state of arrested decay. 110 original buildings frozen exactly as they were left. Furniture still in the houses. Bottles still on shelves. It draws over 200,000 visitors a year, and the access road, State Route 270, closes to vehicles in winter. The last 3 miles are unpaved. To visit Bodie in winter, you ski or snowshoe in. And then there's the Bodie curse. According to local legend, anyone who removes an artifact from the town will suffer terrible luck. The curse was reportedly invented by a park ranger who wanted to stop tourists from pocketing souvenirs. It worked too well. The park now receives a steady stream of packages in the mail containing stolen nails, rocks, bottles, and broken glass, accompanied by handwritten apology letters begging for the curse to be lifted. People confess to years of bad luck, divorces, job losses, car accidents, all blamed on a single rusty nail taken from a ghost town at 8,400 feet. Whether the curse is real is irrelevant. The letters are real, and they keep coming. Number 1. Cerro Gordo. A man named Brent Underwood spent his life savings buying an abandoned ghost town in the Inyo Mountains above Owens Valley. Then a pandemic started. Then he got snowed in, alone, for 10 weeks, at 8,500 feet. In a town once known as California's bloodiest mining camp, he turned it into a YouTube channel with almost 2 million subscribers. That's the short version. The long version involves silver, murder, Los Angeles, and the kind of entrepreneurial insanity that only makes sense if you've already signed the paperwork. Cerro Gordo, which translates to Fat Hill, sits at 8,500 feet on a steep, winding dirt road called the Yellow Grade that climbs from the Owens Valley floor into the Inyo Mountains. Silver was discovered here in 1865, and within a few years the operation grew to between 4,000 and 5,000 people. The silver from Cerro Gordo is widely credited with building early Los Angeles. Historian Remy Nadeau wrote that it provided the principal trade of Los Angeles in the early 1870s, and by 1869, Cerro Gordo was the largest producer of silver and lead in the entire nation. It was also unbelievably violent. Local accounts describe miners putting sandbags in their bunk beds at night to stop stray bullets from hitting them while they slept. The camp reportedly averaged a murder a week during its peak years, earning it the reputation as California's bloodiest mining camp. The ore went down the mountain on mule trains, across Owens Lake by steamship from Keeler, and eventually to the railhead and on to Los Angeles. By the early 1900s, the silver was gone, and so were the people. About 20 original structures survived, including the American Hotel, which was the oldest hotel on the east side of the Sierra Nevada. In 2018, Brent Underwood and his business partners purchased the entire 336-acre town, all 22 buildings, for $1.4 million. He moved there full-time in March 2020, right as the pandemic hit. Then winter arrived. The Yellow Grade Road snowed shut, and Underwood found himself alone in a ghost town at 8,500 feet with no way out for 10 weeks. He started filming. His YouTube channel, Ghost Town Living, now has roughly 1.87 million subscribers and over 145 million total views. His debut video about spending his life savings on the abandoned town has been watched more than 8.7 million times. He published a book by the same name in March 2024. In June 2020, the historic American hotel burned down in a suspected electrical fire. Underwood rebuilt it, completing the reconstruction in late 2025. Celebrity visitors including Jeff Goldblum and Cole Sprouse have made the trek up the Yellow Grade to see the place for themselves. Cerro Gordo is the ultimate Eastern Sierra story, a silver mine that built a city 200 miles away, a camp so violent that sleeping required body armor, a ghost town that sat empty for a century, and a guy who bought it, got trapped in it by snow and a global pandemic, and turned that imprisonment into a career. You cannot make this stuff up. And that's the Eastern Sierra in a single sentence. It will isolate you, bury you, and test you. And the people who stay wouldn't have it any other way. This entire corridor from Olancha to Bodie, from Keeler to Mammoth Lakes, runs along a single highway through some of the most dramatic landscape in North America. 14,000-foot peaks directly above the valley floor. Ghost town sitting right next to bottled water plants. A gas station deli that serves lobster bisque. A town that plays sports in a different state because California forgot about them. And a lake that Los Angeles drank so thoroughly that the empty basin became the most polluted air source on the continent. If you made it this far, you're clearly the kind of person who appreciates the weird, beautiful, terrifying corners of this country that most people never think about. Hit subscribe. We do this every week. And if you want to see another deep dive into forgotten American towns, the video on screen is calling your name. I'll see you in the next one.